Hello, and thank you for taking the time to watch this video. It will be on the primary arms special purchase 1:6 by 24 with the ACSS Nova reticle. This is not a well-known scope. More people are familiar with their SLX version of this. This version, being made in the Philippines, does have significantly better glass than the SLX version, but in a lot of ways it's very similar. About the same size, about the same weight, but it does have a few key improvements over the SLX version. The first of which, if you take a look at the illumination dial, is that there is a stop in between each setting. Now, this particular scope was bought as a factory blemish because it does not have the appropriate brightness. It is bright, but it is not as bright as the SLX version. It's really not even close. And I'll demonstrate that later in the video. But it is nice to have an off position between each one, whereas on the SLX you have to dial all the way back down to 0. So I like that, especially since on the 10 power on the SLX, it is crazy bright. So unless you're outside like in the desert or on a snowy day with sunlight, the 10 power on the SLX is too bright. You're probably going to be closer to the 5 or 6 setting. So on this one, we have the included throw lever. This one's also not quite as stiff as the SLX version, which I have, and I'm going to bring in here in a second. But it has the same 180-degree throw. You can use their aftermarket folding lever on this one as well. It has the same attachment method with this little key and the 2 screws. It also comes with the exposed turret. I don't think that this is particularly necessary on this sort of scope, but if you like to dial, this will allow you to do it. It does not have a 0 stop. Obviously, it can be reset to 0 within 3 individual set screws. That comes in the box. The key for that comes in the box with the scope. This one got a nice O-ring gasket to keep that watertight. It's down here on the edge. Regular cap, and then it has, really for a 1:6 LPVO, pretty nice turrets. These are also resettable to 0. There's 3 set screws on this one as well. Though, if it's a cap turret, I don't know that it's particularly necessary to reset it to 0. Individual clicks are nice. You can feel them, but they make almost no sound whatsoever. They're very quiet. Windage turret is the same story. Have these on there tight. And it is marked left and right if you wanted to reset that to 0. But again, I don't think that that's particularly necessary on a cap turret on a 1:6 LPVO. At the back of the scope, we have our adjustable diopter. Now, in the case of this one, when it was extended to this distance where I need it for my eyeballs, there was too much play. So what I did was take a piece of grip tape, and like you would do with a piece of pipe tape, I put it around the bell, or around the inner radius of that thing, and then just tightened it down until this tape became wedged in the body, and that has eliminated all of my play. Ideally, I could send it back to Primary Arms under their warranty, and they could possibly fix it, but there's also the possibility that it would not be able to be fixed just because these were apparently a limited run. And so whether or not they would have new ones to send back to me that doesn't have that play, I don't know. I'm content with this solution. It has a 30mm tube. Let me read these specs off to you off the box real quick. So we're looking at a 30mm main tube. We have 10.7 inches in length and 17.6 ounces. It has the 10 brightness settings with the off in between. And it is in the second focal plane. If you want to pause the video and look at those, you're free to do that. You can also look them up on Primary Arms website. There's not much else to talk about. It's good scope. The glass clarity we'll see later in the video, but it's really become one of my favorite scopes that I own. I have it on my primary rifle, and the glass and the reticle, for me, do exactly what I need them to do. There you go. So, quick comparison between it and its SLX brother. To be honest, when I bought this scope, I didn't realize that it was different. I thought it was this scope and didn't look at it particularly closely on the website because it was on sale for like $200. So I just did, you know, a quick purchase, and then when I received it and got a closer look at it, I realized that it was in fact a substantially better scope than the SLX. Not that the SLX is bad, and I'm sure you've seen plenty of reviews on it. It's a nice scope, but this, being made in the Philippines, does have the Philippines glass, whereas this, being made in China, has the Chinese glass, and it just isn't as nice. Like I said, not to say that it's bad, because it isn't, but there is a noticeable difference. So you can see that the turrets are not the same size. The illumination knob on this one is the one everybody's familiar with. This one has a nice rubberized texture. And then the caps, it'll be easier to tell. Get this off of here. It's just altogether a slightly, I wouldn't even say slightly, it is altogether a higher quality. The feel is better on this one. The damping on this ring, though still tight, is not as aggressive as on the SLX. The field of view seems to be almost identical, but just the quality of the image from edge to edge is superior on this one. And I hope that Primary Arms chooses to bring it to standard production and not just a special limited production run, because I think for the difference in price between this one at MSRP around $300 to $350 and this one, which was at $400, it's a no-brainer for this. If you can get this for $100 to maybe $125 more than this one, I would take this one every day. Though the sales on this one make it very compelling when it gets down to that $250 range, I would still choose this one. The Primary Arms Special Purchase 1-6 has pretty basic turrets. They are capped on both the windage and elevation. They are an improvement over the Gen 3. They have much better clicks. You can feel them. They're not particularly loud. And the 0 does not have a very clear marking to know when you have it lined up. It is resettable, which is nice, but you're going to get it zeroed. You're going to put the cap on, and you're not going to think about it again until you have to change loads or re-zero it for some other reason. The windage turret is the exact same. It is nicely marked for left and right, but as with the elevation turret, you're going to set it, you're going to leave it, and you'll probably never think about it until you have to re-zero the rifle for some reason. The scope does come with a replaceable tactile turret for the elevation. I don't find it very useful because it doesn't have a zero stop or any kind of rev counter, so losing your zero is a real possibility. On this side we have the same illumination dial as you see on the GLX line. It's got the rubberized finish. It's got the stops between the illumination levels, and the clicks are quite tactile and stiff enough that they're not going to bump off out of position accidentally. And on this one it also goes from 1 all the way back around to 10. I find that for most situations, either a 7 or an 8 is plenty bright. Here we have the fiber wire Nova reticle in the special purpose 1:6. As you can see, it's in second focal plane. So wherever you are in the magnification, the reticle will appear to be the same size. On the illumination dial, we have 10 settings. Maximum brightness there at 10. Now, this particular scope was purchased as a blem that stated that it had suboptimal illumination, but in my personal use, the number 10 setting is still bright enough for sunny days, and I have had no problems. Most scenarios, I'm running it closer to like a 7 or an 8. And if you're at like an indoor range or something like that, I'm probably going to be down around like a 5. Now I'm going to turn the backlight off here in a second. We'll see the entire illumination range. Go ahead and turn it back down to 1 to start. Okay, so now we're at 0. And we have 1. And there's an off between each setting. Five, 6, we're starting to see some bloom. 7, 8, 9, and then 10, where you can start to see some illumination escaping the center dot on the horizontal stadia and up the vertical stadia. That is apparent with the naked eye as well. I find that in most low light conditions, you're going to be probably around a 6, 7. In most daylight conditions, I don't typically have it above an 8. But if you need the extra illumination, it is there. If you find one of these that is not the blem version with the suboptimal illumination, the illumination will be considerably brighter. I've had a chance to try this against an SLX, and the SLX was noticeably brighter, especially at the high end. It was very bright. I do like this version better because it has the stop. There are the off positions between each illumination setting, which the SLX does not have. Okay, so we're going to try to work quickly here while we have some sunlight coming through the clouds. This is the primary arms special purchase 1:6 with the ACSS Nova reticle. And right in front of us we see our 50-yard power pole. We are at 1x magnification currently. We'll go ahead and zoom in to our maximum magnification of 6. And for some reason my camera doesn't particularly like this scope because I can just barely adjust the focus and it goes from a blurry mess to a nice clean image with minimal chromatic aberration, where we have nice detail on our 50-yard tower or power pole. Yeah, we're starting to lose the sun a little bit, so let's hurry down here to our 110-yard power pole. So again, we have a good clean image. Obviously we have maximum 6 power magnification, so we're not going to be zoomed in very far, but we do have a nice depth of field between the tower and the tree line at about 300 yards. So I'll let you take a minute there to look at that. Notice the individual wires going from the bottom rail up to the top rail where the transmission lines are, and the lack of chromatic aberration on that black cap sitting on top of the pole. Okay, let's move on. Pan down. We're going to pan past our 50-yard tower. over to our 130 yard sign. There we go. Again, I'm going to just tease the focus, get everything nice and clear. And at 130 yards, we're able to make out the little bits of blowing grass. We're able to read that sign pretty clearly. And again, just the depth of field that we have all the way out there to that next road and 300 yard tree line. Really quite a usable image. No trouble identifying your targets. I'm going to pan past the truck over to our area rules and regulation signs at 310 yards. There we go. And again, even with 6x magnification, we can make out quite a bit of detail on those individual signs. Not quite legible just because of the distance. But if you were using this for competition, you had to shoot, 10-inch gongs at 300 yards, you would have no trouble seeing those targets and making those shots, which with this particular reticle would be more in line with that first hash mark. So let me just see if I can get that to set on there. There you go. That's a clear image of the crosshair. So you could pick out any one of those individual papers and place a shot on that if you needed to. All right, let's move over here to our first brick pump house at 330 yards. There we go. And now on the sun-facing side, we can see the individual bricks on the very bottom of that middle transformer. You can just make out a red number 75. That's about a 2-inch tall font on that number 75. And we can make out a fair amount of detail on the grass here in the foreground, which is actually only at about 40 yards. Some of those, let me give you a cut. Oop, no, correction, that is 70 yards. So this grass down here in the foreground is at about 70 yards. Those are actually the remains of a dandelion field that the Missouri Conservation Department plants in this field every year. So let's see if we can go down to our 500 yard tower, or water tower. I'm gonna have to move, yep. Okay, so now we have our 500 yard, well, 550 yard pump tower, or pump building. And on that, again, we can see quite a bit of detail on the handrail. We can make out many of the trunks in the tree line behind it at the front of the tree line. That's at 600 yards. And we can also see, well, one power pole is blocking our view of the transformer. There's a transformer right there behind the brown power pole. And that power pole is at 357 yards, and the tower, the pump house behind it, is at 550 yards. Let me zoom this out so we can get an idea of our field of view at 1 power. So there we go. At 1x we have this pole, which is approximately 6 feet away. and has, let me just pan across it. When we look at our ladder steps, or stairs for our tower that we're sitting on, and we pan across this support beam, we really don't see hardly any fisheyeing or bowing of that image whatsoever, which is really nice. Now this one that I purchased was on discount because it is considered a blem, because the overall brightness was considered substandard. And so on a cloudy overcast day, that is maximum brightness. And with the naked eye, it is actually quite bright enough. But for people who are really looking for that blinding Nova reticle, this particular one, because it's a blem, does not have it. But I find in most lighting conditions that I don't particularly want the red illumination. I actually like the plain crosshair quite a bit. So I'll just pan back to where we began, here at our 50-yard tower, our 110-yard tower, and our 300-yard conservation rules back there in the distance. And I think that gives us a pretty good idea of the capability of this scope. So what are my final thoughts on the special purpose 1:6? I have to say that it is easily my favorite LPVO to date. I like the simplicity of the reticle, I like the illumination, I like the tactile feel of the illumination knob and the included throw lever. For the money, even if you pay the full price of about $400, I think that it is possibly the best 1:6 scope in the second focal plane that you can get for under about $1,000. I hope that Primary Arms decides to include this in their GLX lineup and make it a regular production item. I think if you're looking for a direct comparison to this, glass quality and feature set, you would have to look at the Viper PST 1:6. It is without a doubt better in every way than the SLX, except for the price, obviously, because the SLX is considerably cheaper. But I think that this one, I believe that this one, you get your money's worth for that extra money. Now, whether or not you'll be able to find one new from Primary Arms if they decide not to continue production of these, I can't say. If you end up having to watch the eBay sales and other internet venues for used ones, the price could be significantly more or potentially significantly less if people just don't know what they have and are just trying to get rid of it. I think that you can't go wrong with this scope if you're looking for a second focal plane with a simple reticle and daylight bright illumination. This is, my opinion, the one to get. I hope that you have found this review useful, and I do intend to make some more in the future, and I hope that you will return to watch those reviews as well. And I'd like to thank each of you, and I hope that you leave your opinions in the comments below. I look forward to reading those, and give this video a like and a subscription if that is what you want to do. And with that, I will leave you to it.